Hello, my name is Jonathan Dewein, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about penetration testing and sort of what I think it is. Um, in a nutshell, it's how to get paid to pretend to be a criminal, but actually help people. So that's kind of sort of the mindset that at least I put myself in when I'm doing the work. I started my own company around July last year called Aegis Digitalis Consulting. I do mostly, my focus is web application pen testing, and I have two other people that are more software architecture and network engineering oriented. Um, it's a lot of fun, and also probably like the second hardest thing I've ever done, so it's good. Uh, could you go back one? Thank you. All right. What is penetration testing? I think I pretty much just told you that, but I guess a more precise definition would just be, you know, the process of systematically probing and exploiting a system or network to identify security vulnerabilities. So it's sort of like when you've got two boxers or mixed martial artists or something, they're gonna spar each other before they do the real fight. That's kind of how I like to look at pen testing. It's you're really just kind of sparring with the company so that they are prepared or more prepared when, not if, when they get attacked or breached or hacked or however you want to say it. All right. So I think it's really important. Obviously, I have a bias, but I really think it's important, and it doesn't seem like as many people see it as important as I see it. So, I mean, you can identify weaknesses in your company with it, right? So a lot of times you can even have good security people that will set up your digital infrastructure. But without that sort of outsider's perspective, right? Everybody's probably had an experience where you're in your little circle and everybody agrees on something, and then somebody from the outside comes in and says something or puts forth an idea or brings something up that nobody thought of. That's one of the most important things in bringing in, and doing pen testing, is that you give sort of an outside additional perspective. Also, a lot of industries like finance, government industries, or governments, things like that, they actually have it as legal requirements for pen testing, for like SOC 2 certifications, things like that. And also, I would just, if I had it builds trust, right? If I had a choice between two companies to give my payment data to, one of them didn't do any security measures, the other one did, it's pretty obvious which one that I would pick. Right? So. All right, now I'm going to just talk a little bit about the pen testing process. This isn't really a set in stone thing. It's just sort of a conceptual overview of how to structure your tests, because you want to try to be as scientific as you can in it. You don't want to go in and do, steps 1, 2, 3 one time and then steps 2, 5, 6, another time. And sometimes you'll forget things, right? You want it to be scientific and methodical so you can get those vulnerabilities and you can find those things that other people might have missed. It typically starts off information gathering, sort of like your scout mission. You usually spend the most time doing this. You spend a very long time making sure that you get as much information, as much data as you possibly can about your target. After that, you take your findings and you do sort of a vulnerability analysis where you take your findings and you say, okay, I found this port is open on this service. It could be something like this. And then you sort of categorize things based on, really you can categorize it based on how you want it. That's mostly up to you. But I find it useful to have, categories for different things like web application, like a network, a hardware, like if it's a router or something. After that, after that, once you actually do the vulnerability analysis, you pick out what you want to. Well, it kind of depends on your terms of engagement, but usually after you do the vulnerability analysis, the next step is actual exploitation of those vulnerabilities. And so, yeah, I mean, that's simple, exploitation of those vulnerabilities. Then post-exploitation. So for example, say you exploit a SQL injection, right? And now you're on some SQL server. Well, what do you do then, right? You sort of start the process, almost like starting the process over again. So what do you do when you're in an unknown environment? You gather information. So you own a machine, you're on it, now you got to figure out exactly what you're on, what you're doing. After that, yeah, privilege escalation, lateral movement there. Some people separate them, but I kind of see them as going hand in hand. So say, for example, you are on a machine as like a really low-level user that doesn't have any privileges or anything like that. How can you figure out how to escalate your privileges? Like, how can you figure out to get from like, some regular normal user up to an admin user? And then sort of tied in with that is, they call it lateral movement. So like if you're on a SQL server, how can you get to the web server? Or like you start on the web server, how do you get to the SQL server, et cetera, right? I put in data exfiltration because I think it's really cool. A lot of companies will have ways to try to track what information leaves. And so there's certain things you can do to try to, like say you have a lot of data, like databases can be huge, can be several megabytes, can be gigantic. And so how can you get that information out without setting off alarms? After that, there's reporting. So really, the most important thing in a pen test is the report. That's the deliverable. That's the thing that your client is going to get that goes over exactly what you did, how they fix it. This is the value that you bring as a pen tester. And then there's retesting. So they will go in and they will say, okay, we fixed this vulnerability. Are you just going to take their word for it, or are you going to actually go in and verify that it's fixed? So retests are very important. Now it's just a little bit more about recon and information gathering. So usually when I'm doing a pen test, like specifically for me, I'm very familiar with web app pen testing. So I'll just go to the website and I'll look around just like a normal user would. I'll go and I'll use this search bar. I'll try to log in. I'll make a user. I'll click all the buttons, visit all the pages. What does robots.txt stay, etc., all that stuff. After that, it's more of, well, sorry, that's actually active recon. I got confused. Passive recon would be stuff like looking them up on showdown.io or, finding them on Google or something, doing stuff like looking at their Facebook page, so you're not directly actually interacting with the company, right? After that, active recon would be visiting their website, right? And then after that, I like to categorize things. It helps me keep track of all the information that you have. Because sometimes on engagements, you can have an absolutely enormous amount of information, and a good, reliable, consistent system to keep that all organized for yourself is pretty important. Yeah, vulnerability identification and analysis. So after you do your recon phase, you've got your information. Now you try to look for vulnerabilities. So, for example, some low-hanging fruit type stuff might be like, oh, I can see this is an Nginx web server that's an old version, right? And then you'll go look at the old versions and see, like, are there any vulnerabilities for it? Do I have any personal knowledge of anything like this? The easy way to get this low-hanging fruit is automated scanning. So there's lots and lots of tools out there that can do this for you. There's like OpenVAS. I think they're called something different now. They've changed a lot. I don't know what they are, but they're basically just automated vulnerability scanners that are not the be-all, end-all. They're useful tools in your toolbox. A lot of people will just run a vulnerability scan and say that's a pen test. Like that's not going to do it. Anybody can do that. It's just a tool, right? So you've got lots and lots of IP addresses, for example. You can kind of scan, kind of help yourself a little bit. Manual analysis. So yeah, this is when, so say for example, you've got something in your automated scanner. It says this is, Nginx version, whatever. Then you'll manually, you'll go in, you'll look at it. There's plenty of tools you can use. I could talk about those later if you want to. The tools are, there's a lot. So you're sort of gonna actually, as a human, verify what you're looking at, right? Because sometimes tools can lie, sometimes they can have bugs. A lot of times, security tools themselves will have security vulnerabilities. So it's pretty funny. And then sort of, I like to, again, risk assessment is consistent with categorization, sort of. So I will take, oh, it looks like this Nginx server that's this old version has a 10 out of 10, CVE rating of this super dangerous, like, remote code execution vulnerability that you can just fire up, Metasploit and just get it right away, right? Something like that you would want to look at a little bit more closely and kind of alert, right, let them know, than something that's like some kind of maybe you could crack this encryption because it's kind of old type vulnerability, right? And then, now on exploitation. So this is sort of what you would call the, I guess, the sexy part, where you actually get, you've got your vulnerabilities analyzed, you've got everything categorized, you know what you're going to do. You say, theoretically, this, Nginx server with this old version should be vulnerable to this remote code execution exploit. This is the part where you would actually do it. A lot of people, they won't want you to actually do that because there's a risk of like knocking down their servers and all kinds of stuff. But in an ideal world, you'll actually be able to run it. And this is where controlling your attack comes in. You don't want to, like, for example, if denial of service is not in scope, you don't want to do that because then they'll get mad at you, right? You don't look like a professional. You don't look like you know what you're doing. And then, this is when you sort of categorize again. This is what I did. I saw that, Nginx is an old version that was vulnerable to this remote code execution exploit. I ran the exploit, and I got, www.admin or something on the web server. This is what I did. This is how I did it. And so that's for your report later, right? Post-exploitation, lateral movement, privilege escalation. They're technically separate, but I kind of group them all together because they're sort of the same, similar stage, right? But I guess overall you could sort of use post-exploitation as the umbrella term, because so now you ran your, you've got www.admin on your Nginx web server. What do you do next, right? Well, you're in an unknown environment. You don't know, like, what are you on? Is it a Windows machine running Nginx, right? Some people do that. And so what are you going to do, right? You sort of start the process over again, but with a slightly different context. Instead of the context of being outside, now you're inside. And so you're going to start off and you're going to do your information gathering, right? You're going to try to figure out what kind of machine am I on? Like, how big is the network? What software is running? What processes are running? Things like that. Sort of learn as much as you can about your environment. And so, for example, you get on your Nginx web server, it's Linux, and you say, oh, this is an old, according to my research, I saw that the kernel on this Linux machine is a really old kernel. That's vulnerable to this root exploitation, root elevation exploitation vulnerability or something, right? This is where you would sort of escalate your privileges, right? You go from a regular user, like a super user or root, or whatever whatever flavor of operating system you're running on. And then, you're going to see, like, usually this part where you get your data depends on the terms of the engagement. But usually you'll, like if you're a criminal, what would you be getting, right? You want to get usernames, you want to get passwords, you want to try to look around the system and see if there's any kind of, like, credentials to another system or sensitive business information. Sometimes there's intellectual property, corporate secrets, things like that some competition or, people may want to sell in the dark market, right? And reporting, the most important part. Um, all the value that you deliver is from this. Because otherwise, you're just saying, hey guys, I just owned all your machines. I'm awesome, right? Like, how is that useful to them? Like, they might think you're cool, or they might think you're just some weird guy that like knocked over their web servers or something. So you have to make sure that you give a good report. Most people don't like this. I'm kind of 50-50. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. But usually when you do your report, the way I like to do them, and sort of the standard way, is to divide it up into 3 sections: your executive summary, your findings, and remediation steps. So the executive summary is going to be the summary for executives. So say you've got the CEO who's working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. He's got people in his ear all the time, extremely busy. He's like, I don't need to know that you ran this race condition and exploited the kernel and blah, blah, blah. I just need to know what happened. What did you do, right? So you sort of say it at a high level overview so that like a layman can understand it, somebody that's not technically savvy can understand it quickly. So you'd say, I was able to gain access to your web server because the software on it was old. Something simple like that he can read it and get it right away. Next is the actual detailed findings. So this is where you're gonna sort of go through what you did at a level where an engineer that may be working to fix the vulnerability can understand it, replicate it, and then work on fixing it. So this is where you would give the technical details, right? Like your Linux version is Linux 2.6. I used this old race condition kernel exploit that was able to get root right away or something, and you say where you got it from, and you go step by step. This is the command I ran, right? And you got your screenshots and everything, so they can see exactly what you did. And then remediation steps. It really depends on some things I found that I don't know how to fix, right? It's just so messed up. I don't know what to do. But most of the time, there's something that you could tell them to help them fix it. Because the number one thing is, right, we want to be helpful. We don't just want to be like, look, I'm super awesome hacker man and I'm a genius. Like you want to help them. That's what they hired you for, is to help them. So, yeah, the remediation steps. Well, your Linux kernel is really old. You should definitely upgrade to the most recent, stable version of Linux, for example, right? So then retesting. I think it's extremely important to retest, because most of the time what people will do, or I shouldn't say most of the time, but sometimes I may or may not have seen people that say they're going to fix stuff, but it's not fixed, right? And that's like it can be a big problem, because if you say you got something fixed, but it's not fixed, then in a way that's even worse than having it not looked at in the first place, because there's that false sense of security there. They're just going to completely dismiss it out of hand and say, that's fixed, you don't have to worry about it. But it's not fixed, it's still vulnerable. And so, plus, computer systems can be incredibly complicated. It's not always simple to just fix a vulnerability or just upgrade a Linux server. What if that's a mission-critical server that has 1 second of downtime allowance per year? Which I've seen, by the way. There's telecommunications companies, certain companies, they have very, very little downtime tolerance. So some of the fixes can get really complicated. And so you have to make sure that you come back and you do the steps that you did again to make sure that they actually fix the vulnerability. Sometimes you have to go back and forth a few times, and that's normal, right? Because the whole thing is we're working together to make our digital infrastructure better, more secure. So regular retest. And then also, I always like to recommend I always recommend continuous learning to everybody. It's just a good life advice. Learn all the time. So this is very, very my opinion oriented. This is what I think makes a good penetration tester. Basically, be me knows. Mischievous mindset. What do you remember what I said back in the beginning? You're sort of pretending to be a criminal. So you have to think like a criminal when you're doing this. Um, I think the way I've seen things is we've really kind of gotten away from that, what hackers were in the beginning, which is, sort of mischievous, curious people. Um, so whenever you're walking around, whenever you see a computer, I can't stop it now. I go to the airport, I'm looking like, oh, that airport is running Windows XP. That's really bad. That guy just let him walk in without badging. He just, backpacked on right on in there and all this stuff. And so, yeah, don't be afraid. Just because you think like a criminal doesn't mean you are one, right? You can have any thoughts you want. What matters are the actions that you take. So, don't be afraid. Don't think you're a bad person, because you're thinking about tricking people, you're thinking about exploiting people or computer systems. That's what it takes to be good at this kind of a job, right? You just take all that energy and use it for good instead of bad. So, continuous learning. This is definitely one of the most important things about being a pen tester. There's no way any human, or at least most humans, can remember everything because there's just so much technology out there, there's so much software. You'll come across things that are common, right, like Active Directory and Nginx and stuff like that. But on every engagement I've ever done, I've always run into stuff that I didn't know what it was. And so that's when, because continuous learning itself is a skill, right? Learning is a skill. So if you get good, you have your own mental sort of systems that you can use to learn new things, like you train yourself to read documentation, you read some news. That way, when you come across new stuff you've never seen before, you know what to do, right? You're not just frozen and say, oh, I don't know what this is. You say, I don't know what this is. Now I can dig into it and learn about it. Right? Yeah, communication. So this very tied in with the report. Be able to explain what you did to different levels of people. And honestly, this is probably the single most difficult part that I've seen most people struggle with in pen testing, because you've got the types of people that are really attracted to computer hacking and stuff, and I used to be a lot like this, is when, don't keep people away from me. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be at my computer. I just want to own the system. Don't bother me, right? But if you can't properly communicate what you did to a client's computer system to hack them and put that in a report that they can understand, you're not being useful, right? Which is also a skill, by the way. All these stuff are skills that you can learn. So just because you say, oh, I'm not very good at communicating, you can learn it. You can get better at it, right? I used to have severe social anxiety, and now I'm talking in front of a bunch of other people, right? So, yeah, don't be afraid to practice. Technical expertise, I mean, this is a pretty obvious one, but I would put technical expertise even below all this stuff, because you can always learn how to be technical and have this expertise. But if you are not in the mindset of being able to learn all the time, you're not a good communicator, you don't have that sort of hacker mindset of like always trying to figure out the weird, tricky stuff, then you could be technical and like very impressive technically, but you're not going to be able to figure out how to hack stuff. So, but anyway, yes, yeah, I would recommend for technical expertise, because there's so much out there. There's a million different things. There's network pen testing, web app pen testing, social engineering, red teaming, which is like everything all at once kind of, mobile pen testing, wireless pen testing, blockchain pen testing, like smart contracts. There's tons of stuff. And then even within mobile, there's all separate operating systems in mobile. There's different software and smart contracts. The list goes on. It's easy to get overwhelmed. And so I would say start kind of broad, and then if something piques your interest, just go a mile deep. Just go into it. And if you find out you don't like it, that's fine. You've got useful knowledge that you're probably going to learn and use at some point in the future anyway. And so you just keep doing that until you find something you like. Like for me, it's web application pen testing. I love that stuff. I started really going at it. So, yeah, analytical mindset. So I guess a better way to say this would just be know what the scientific method is. A a lot of people in my experience don't really understand exactly what the scientific method is. So like you know, how to separate, like, for example, if you are going at a system, right? Like say it's a web application, and you have inputs and fields, and you're trying to test, and you put like A, B, and C in 3 fields, and then you put B, B, and C, and then C, B, and C, right? And you go through one by one. But if you go A, B, C, A3, and you're just kind of randomly throwing inputs around, if that makes sense, it's not a methodical scientific way of doing it. So if something changes, you don't know what variable is the thing that caused the change. And then yes, ethical integrity. So, it's okay to think like a criminal. It's not okay to be one. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is taken very seriously. They will drop the hammer on you faster than you can blink if you violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And so, in order to do this stuff, you're going to be exposed to a lot of things that can be very tempting. I'm not going to lie and say, I've never been tempted with the ability to steal $1 million, for example, right? Everybody's going to be tempted to some degree by something like that. You see a ton of social security numbers, you're kind of mischievous like me, right? Then you start thinking, oh, right, what if I did this and that? You cannot do that under any circumstances, right? So you have to have strong integrity for yourself, and you have to take pride in yourself as a pen tester, right? You're a professional, you're not a criminal, right? Otherwise, you're not helping people, you're hurting people, and pen testers are supposed to help people. Yeah, times. Hey, I was almost exactly on my time with that. So, yeah, I believe there's a Q&A now, right? So, yeah, anybody have any questions? You in the back behind her, I saw him first. Yes.
You mentioned earlier that you were talking
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You were mentioning earlier that you were talking about open boss for obviously one way to scan.
Yeah.
Do you ever use Nixo for
Yes. Yes.
I know it's for specifically custom software, but I guess it's a lot harder to learn for one than open boss, and do you see the clients looking to actually use that, or is it more easy for open boss?
Well, some tools are easier to learn than others. Sometimes clients will want you to use specific tools, in which case you have to, right? But I mean, I like to use whatever I think is good for the job, and so that's sort of an experience thing. But also, that's why being able to read computer code is so important, is because you don't have to be some kind of super elite software architect guy that could like create Facebook or something, but you can, you should be able to read code well enough to understand what the software you're running does. So for example, you could see, oh, Nikto, looks at these things and like looks at more web directories and more WordPress vulnerabilities than say OpenVAS does. And so if you're on a WordPress site, you might use Nikto instead of OpenVAS, for example. Or like if you're doing an internal network scan, which is something that OpenVAS would be more suited for, you'd use OpenVAS instead of Nikto, right? So it's just sort of understanding what tools you're using. But.
Hey guys, for your questions, you're going to keep your hand on my screen. You need it to be super loud or go stand up there. What you do there, I know it's awkward, but when you practice.
I could repeat the question too. I could just repeat the question.
That would be great.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that. All right, and I believe I saw you after that.
Yes, please. Okay. When you're writing these pen test reports and you're writing these executive summaries, what if it doesn't come naturally to you that you have the concise style of writing that it calls for? What do you suggest on how to build those skills? Are you putting a prompt into AI? If so, like what would a good prompt be to give me some feedback to like help me write it the way that it won't make them snooze face on the table when I'm trying to explain what needs to be said?
Yeah, so you want to know how to write a good executive summary if you don't feel like you're good at that?
Yeah.
How to get better at it? Well, I mean, you could say go to your, like if you're parents are old and have Facebook, you could say, practice on them, right? You could go to Facebook or something and try to write an executive summary and give it to some people that give it to the guy who's done construction his whole life and doesn't know anything about computers, right? Give it to him and say like, hey, can you understand this, right? You gotta I would do it by like talking to people
Yeah.
and
Okay.
giving them some examples, talking to them. That's how I would do it. Is that?
Kind of on the same line as her, when it comes to your documentation, is there a format that's like better suited for delivering that? Like, not so much format, but I guess when you're looking at what you did, should you put it in like a chart or like, hey, this is what I did, this is what happened, like, or is it best to just kind of list it all out in like paragraph form? Or?
So you want to know about different report formats,
Yeah.
and like whether it's better to just have a huge wall of text or just have graphs or
Because in my mind, when I think about like reading a report, if it's a giant wall of text, my brain automatically kind of goes fuzzy. But
yeah. Okay, so well, I'll just go a little bit deeper into reports. So when you're in the middle of doing your pen test, you should be taking screenshots and everything as you're doing the test. Because some of these things, right, you won't be able to remember everything you do because sometimes it can take a really long time, sometimes it can get really complicated. Sometimes the network is not static, and so things will change. Sometimes a website will be up and then it won't be the next day because they're doing maintenance or any one of a billion things, right? So as you're doing your test, you say, oh, I got this, I ran this command and I got this output. Take a screenshot of it. And so your report is generally going to be a mix of text and screenshots. The executive summary is just going to be a very short paragraph, right? Unless there's some kind of graph or something that you could put in, but I've never done that personally. And then after that, in the detailed findings, it'll be a mix of text and pictures. So you'll say, I ran this command and got this output, and then it'll be a picture of it, right? And it'll say, this led me to this directory where I ran this command and got this output that was a username and password, and then you've got the screenshot of your username and password. So it's going to be a mix. Does that help?
oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Kind of make a picture, but
Yeah. Yes.
You said one of my favorite words, WordPress. Will you talk to us about all the lovely things you can exploit in WordPress?
All of the lovely things you can exploit in WordPress. I think the better question is, what can you not exploit in WordPress? WordPress gets a bad rep, but it's improved a lot over the years. But the number one thing about WordPress, in my experience, is all of the third-party plugins. Because you can have base software that is very robust and well-developed and in good software. But then you've got third-party plugins written by who knows who wrote it, right? So you could have some plugin written by somebody that is not a very good programmer or is a good programmer and just isn't aware of secure coding practices, right? Which happens all the time. And so you go and your base software is really good, but then you put this third-party module into it that you haven't checked has some kind of security vulnerability. Even if your website, your WordPress website is pretty solid, that third-party plugin is how they're going to get in. And so this sort of leads into a bigger picture of whenever you're using extra software or modules or third-party stuff, always make sure you check that. Because sometimes even there will be malicious third-party plugins written by criminals to try to fool you into putting into, so yeah, WordPress is fun. I always get happy when I see it. So.
We take one from the chat room, real quick. Okay. This is from Corey, which this is a great question. We get this a lot. When looking for a job in the pen testing field, what do you find most important or beneficial? Certificates, education, hands-on experience, etc.
It's a really good question. It all depends on who you want to work for, because some companies value college degrees a lot, some value certifications a lot, some value personal projects a lot. Me personally, I don't have a college degree, I don't have any certifications. And so what I did was I made a GitHub that I put my passion projects on. And that is sort of what I leverage to get my foot in the door with employers. I could say, they could say, oh, you don't have a college degree. And I said, that's true, but you can tell that the proof is right here. I've got this GitHub repo with all these projects, and so if I were hiring for my company, I would look at sort of passion and curiosity first, and those things lead into personal projects. Because if you like something enough and you're motivated and you're driven and you're disciplined about it, you'll go and make some projects. You'll do it on your own. You won't say, oh, I can't pay for college, or I can't pay for the certification, I just give up, right? If you really want to do it, you'll find a way. And so I would, it all depends on who you want to work for. So, yeah, I guess that's fine.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on what interns might be required to know before starting off versus what you are going to teach them as an employer? Is a question I know that we get. They go into a job and they feel like they're expected to know how to do all of it, or to know how to do everything. They got the fancy degree, they got all the certs, and they get there and they're overwhelmed with what they're being asked to do. What I know we've been trying to tell folks is they're going to teach you, they're going to help you. Can you kind of just elaborate on that a little bit?
They will. So what you just described is imposter syndrome, where you feel like you got this job, this is awesome, you feel like everybody around you is a super genius, that they all know what they're doing, and you're just a big dummy who shouldn't be there, right? No one else knows what they're doing either. Everybody else is kind of, you kind of know what you're doing to some degree, but they all had those experiences too. A huge part of the job, especially with I'm speaking specifically towards pen testing because that's where my experience is being able to learn. So they won't judge you on what you know. They'll judge you on your willingness to learn, how quickly you can learn, and if they're a good employer, they will have seniors there and leads there that will mentor you and guide you through stuff. So if you should never be afraid to ask a question. One of this experience that I had when I first got in was, I can't remember exactly what the question was, but it was a question that I knew I should know the answer to, and it was a basic question, but I was super scared to ask him because I thought I'd get ridiculed. I'd be like, well, you should know that, right? And so I held off on asking it for a year. But that just made it worse because then when I finally asked it, because I messed something up, and I didn't ask the question a year before that, I messed something up, and they're like, well, why didn't you know this? And then I asked the question, and they said, well, you've been here a year, how do you not know this already? Why didn't you ask us before? So, yeah, good employers should have people in place. They should have seniors that part of their responsibility is to mentor junior employees and help you. And so don't be afraid to ask questions. Even if it is a question that you're supposed to know, nobody can remember everything, right? And so, they might rib you a little bit, but that's okay, right? You take it, you learn, you move on. It's all about learning and moving forward. Does that help? Yes.
Yeah, so you mentioned you enjoy pen testing web apps. So I was wondering if you could maybe go a little deeper into your methodology and what your go-to tools are when you're testing out a web app.
Sure. So pretty much, I like to I sort of glossed over a little bit. So I will like to just sort of use it like a normal user. Go in and test out all the input fields, search boxes, buttons, check boxes, anything that has some sort of functionality. I like to play with that. And then usually, if there's usually a space on the website for an unauthorized user. then there's a space for like an authorized user. And, you know, there's some different things that could happen there, like depending on how it's how the architecture is. And so I sort of treat those two things as separately. So I'll look at like the unauthorized part, do the input validation, play with the stuff, and then either make a user. Sometimes I'll just, for fun, just throw in admin or something, right? Because if you get lucky right at the start, it makes it easy. And then, I mean, there's a lot of different stuff that you can find. So like, my favorite tool is a web proxy. And so, I mean, the two common ones are Burp Suite and Zap, Attack Proxy by OWASP. Those let you, it sort of like stands up, kind of like standing up a server in between you and the website. And so you send the web requests to it, and it catches the web requests.
Yeah.
And as a web app pen tester, you really, really have to know all about web requests, all the different requests and methods and all the stuff, and how, because that's how the web application is communicating with your browser. And so a lot of successful attacks are with, you know, Burp Suite, for example. So I mean, that's kind of how I start off.
Have you tried out Kaido yet?
I'm sorry,
Kaido?
Kaido?
Kaido's a kind of a newer proxy like Burp Suite, but
Oh, I haven't heard of that. No.
oh, it's actually it's pretty cool. It doesn't throttle you if you're using like what do you call it, like an injection mode. I can't remember what it's called, an intruder in Burp Suite.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have the pro, like it'll throttle the request.
Yeah.
Kaido won't do it.
Okay.
Yeah, even on the free version. It's pretty
Kaido,
simple. Check it
like
out.
K-A-I-D-O.
C-A-I-D-O.
C-A-I-D-O. Okay, that's cool. That's very useful. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have more from the chat room, but yeah, put it.
Yeah, we kind of, tell us your favorite story.
So, I used to work at a company, and it was a big company, and we had very specific rules as to how we could engage things because there was such little allowed downtime per year. And so we usually would do our testing like late at night, like 8 p.m. to midnight and beyond as necessary, just so in case something happened, it wouldn't be like during prime use hours. And this third-party bug bounty hunter found something on the company's main website, on like the front page, and it was pretty bad. And by bad I mean good, because the director of the attack and pen team got really mad at us, even though he told us specifically not to test the website. So it was out of our scope, so we never touched it. As soon as this third-party bug bounty hunter comes along and finds it, they got mad at us and we're like, dude, you told us not to do this. Can you go to the CTO and tell him that if you don't want this stuff to happen in the future, we need like free reign over the websites, and like we have to do all these web app pen tests, and I sort of used it as like my sort of a wedge to get into like red teaming. And so he went to the CTO, came back, was like, okay, we just got to stop this from happening again. And so they let us buy all these really awesome tools, like a Wi-Fi pineapple and stuff. And we got to, I got to just set up and do just the most sinister stuff to my own employees. But while all funded and by the company, you know, and so, yeah, kind of managed to turn a bad situation into a good one with that. But that was my favorite because it really showed me all these tools. Like I got to work with all this expensive hardware that I never got to use before. So that was really fun.
Okay, I've got two from Iris. One is just kind of a recap. Did you say that WordPress is fine? A bit afraid to use WordPress. I don't know if you just want to quick hit that again real quick.
Yeah, so it's okay to use WordPress, but you just, like any other software, you just want to be careful. It has a bad reputation because there's so many third-party plugins that were poorly designed and poorly made that people just slapped on to their applications and called it a day, and then they got exploited. WordPress is perfectly fine to use, just as long as you know what you're putting in. Like, you know what this module is, you look up the company or whatever, you verify that, like, okay, these guys, know what they're doing, they've got good reviews or something like that, right? Don't just slap anything on there, right? WordPress is fine.
So yes, but be careful.
Exactly, yes, yes, but be careful.
Okay, also from Iris, what is the best way to get started pen testing? I know we do it some now with TryHackMe, but what can we do all on our own to get hands-on experience? I always feel overwhelmed with what is the best way to start.
So my favorite thing, I don't have very much experience with TryHackMe. All my experience is with Hack the Box. And they just recently released, I think within the last couple of years, they have these things called job role paths. And they've got like certified bug bounty hunter, certified penetration testing specialist, they've even got like a SOC analyst one. And the way they have structured it is you can start from the beginning and they take you step by step through the stuff with practical exercises. So I love that. I've been through that and it's really good. But make sure that you have a healthy mix of theory and application. You won't get better at it if you just sit there and you just read about all kinds of stuff. You gotta do it. So go to Hack the Box. TryHackMe has a whole bunch of, like CTF competitions. There's plenty of CTF competitions out there that they'll have their competition period and then they'll leave all their stuff open for anybody to just use at their leisure afterwards. Like Plaid CTF, I think, is one of them. Go do that stuff and just dive right in. It'll feel bad at first because you'll feel like you won't know anything, but because it's hard, right? It's not easy. But you perseverance, you keep going, you keep reading, you keep researching, you read over some walkthroughs, just keep moving forward is my thing. So just get in and like start doing it, if that makes sense.
I have more if you guys don't. The virtual crowd is a lot more interactive. From Nathan, what training would you recommend for web app pen testing? How did you learn web app pen testing?
So I learned web app pen testing from this book called, what is it? It's called The Hacker's Guide to, the Web App Pen Test, or the Web App Hacker's Handbook, I think is what it's called. This thing is like the size of like 2 Bibles. It's huge, and it's pretty old. But the fundamentals of it are sound. And then playing around online and like probably doing some things I shouldn't have to websites and stuff. But the way now that I would do it, the best thing that I've ever seen to learn web app pen testing would be Hack the Box's Certified Bug Bounty Hunter. It's called Bug Bounty Hunter, but it should be called Web App Pen Tester because it goes through there, teaches you all about web requests, the different protocols and what they do, different tools to get started with, methodology that you can follow as a beginner. So Hack the Box's Certified Bug Bounty Hunter is what I have experience with. And so if you're interested in web app stuff, that is a great start.
So there's a conversation happening. I'm trying to find questions in before you. Another one from Iris. Can you teach a class? But I'm not exactly sure what specifics we're looking at here. So maybe that's it for us. Unless you do you do any teaching, like specifics that you, other than this, or?
Well, I don't do teaching right now, but I love to talk about pen testing. And I love to give people that are just starting out what I didn't have, like what I know now that I wish I would have had when I was starting off. right? I love to do that. We kind of threw around maybe teaching, but there's nothing really solid yet. I would love to do it. You know, I like to help people. So
We'll be talking.
yes.
So, I've heard that a way to get into web testing, as of recent, because Hackbox just came out with it, was to go CBBH and then to their new web-specific certification, but I haven't heard that much back. It's so new.
It's
You know anything about that?
yeah, certified web exploitation expert.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the spider on it.
Yep.
That is, I mean, it's the logical progression of the CBBH. It goes into more advanced stuff, more playing around with like protocols and requests specifically. I haven't gone through it, and it's just what I've heard from my friends. But I've heard nothing but good things about it. It's pretty tough, which is good, because if it was easy, then it's unrealistic. So it's supposed to challenge you.
Here to ask if you guys want
Oh, sorry, I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you.
Very good, stop studying, but I said I figured, speaking of the story that like she asked, I'm not curious, do you have a story of you doing like a physical test? On the mobile knife, some of those people attack physically, curious if you have any examples.
So I think probably my favorite thing is doing social engineering and like physical pen testing. I haven't had the good fortune to do like a real one yet, but I do it every day in my life. I mean, what I used to do when I was theoretically, like what I may have done when I was a teenager in high school is walk into movie theaters and you just walk right up past and they'll check your ticket and you just confidently just be like, no, I'm good. I got my ticket. I've just got my family's in the theater, right? And you just walk right on by. And with most people, like if you just do it confidently like that, they will just let you go. When I used to live in Utah, and I worked for this company where they would have these a smoke break section outside, and you have to badge to get back in. And every day I would just, especially when I started before people got to know me, I would just like backpack in right behind people and see how many times I could get in without swiping my badge. And then if somebody asked me to swipe my badge, you try to see if you can still get them to let you in without swiping your badge, right? So while I don't have like professional experience, the best thing about this is you can just do it all the time, right? Obviously you shouldn't do anything illegal or something that's going to get you in trouble or hurt, but it's fun. You know, they like ask you, oh, hey, can you badge? Oh, I forgot my badge. It's like, it's up on my desk. I'll just go get it and I'll badge next time. And like, as you're walking away, right? Like most people are not confrontational. Most people are nice. They don't want to get into a fight or like, so they'll just let you go. Yeah.
Thank you, John. We appreciate you.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for coming. This was fun.
So how many people do we have online, Corey?
I'm not sure how many.